Only a single choice from a 5-year-old Apache girl could shake an entire Dustwood town to its core and alter the fate of everyone in a heartbeat. That girl was Ayani, a child of the Apache people, silent since the winter her parents had vanished from this world. She carried grief too heavy for her small frame, yet her dark eyes held a quiet, wary intelligence. She was a figure both fragile and unyielding, moving through the shadows of the town like a whisper the wind refused to carry away. Dustwood itself was a town caught between worlds, a strip of wooden buildings, dirt streets, and the lingering dust of unpaved roads. The late afternoon sun stretched long, dusty fingers across the main street, striking the boards with a golden glow that did nothing to soften the watchful eyes of its townsfolk. Ayani had stationed herself at the far edge of the street behind a stack of empty crates, her small body curled like a sparrow hiding from a hawk. She observed, without being observed, each step and glance of the townspeople, recorded and cataloged in a mind sharpened by caution. The town was busy, preparing for a modest afternoon market. Merchants rolled barrels, called out prices, and arranged fabric bolts, while the smell of fresh bread mingled with the dry air. But even amid the bustle, a curious unease lingered. Whispers ran like smoke between the wooden storefronts. That Apache girl. She doesn't belong here. Nobody questioned why she was silent. Silence itself was enough to make her a figure of suspicion, an outsider. She had been cast as a puzzle, to be avoided, an enigma whose presence made grown men glance over their shoulders. Yet for all her fear, Ayani's gaze never wavered from the town's life. She watched children dart between stalls, merchants haggling in voices that rose above the clamor, and horses stamping impatiently in the dusty sun. Her expression was unreadable, yet every movement hinted at a mind always calculating, always weighing the world beyond her small hands. To anyone else, she might have seemed invisible, but for those with eyes to see, there was a tension in her posture that spoke louder than words. Something was about to happen, though nobody, not even Ayani herself, could predict the ripple it would send through Dustwood. As the townspeople continued their routines, the contrast between Ayani's stillness and their hurried motion heightened the air of suspense. Why did she not speak? Why did she hide? Why did she seem to absorb every glance, every gesture, as though the town itself were a lesson she needed to learn before moving forward? It was this quiet mystery that drew the audience in an unspoken promise that something small could hold consequences larger than any of them imagined. And there, under the relentless sun and the long shadows of the afternoon, the story of courage, empathy, and the collision of worlds began. The tension wasn't just about a girl or a town. It was about a fragile balance between fear and understanding, prejudice and hope. It mirrored a truth still relevant today. Fear of the unknown, especially between cultures, can run deep and quietly poison communities. But sometimes the smallest gesture can ignite a force more powerful than centuries of mistrust. Ayani crouched, motionless, yet fully aware, a silent sentinel at the edge of the dusty street. For Dustwood, and for anyone watching her story unfold, the stage was set. Something extraordinary was about to break through the ordinary, and the entire town, along with the audience, was about to feel the first tremors of a moment that could change everything. Tommy Clark had noticed her the moment he stepped out of his father's store. The boy was 9, curious by nature but cautious, taught from birth to respect boundaries, even invisible ones drawn by fear and prejudice. From his vantage point near the dusty counter of his father's general store, he saw Ayani crouched behind a stack of barrels, her dark eyes tracing the movements of the townspeople without a sound. There was something in the way she watched that drew him in a quiet intensity that made him pause mid-step. Ayani's small frame trembled with hunger, though she would not approach anyone for help. She had learned early that asking meant rejection or worse, suspicion. Her motherless, fatherless life had taught her to hide, to shrink into shadows where she might be overlooked. Yet, despite her caution, there was a glimmer of longing in her gaze, a silent plea that only a child could understand. Tommy recognized it immediately, as if he could feel the echo of her need in his own chest. He clutched the piece of bread his mother had packed for his midday meal, the edges still warm and fragrant. His stomach wasn't empty, but it seemed suddenly small beside the emptiness he saw in Ayani. Without fully thinking it through, he took a step closer and held the bread toward her, his fingers shaking just enough to betray the weight of what he was about to do. The townspeople, ever wary of the Apache girl, froze at the sight. Samuel and Sarah Clark, standing at the doorway, noticed their son's movement. Samuel's brow furrowed as he called out, "Tommy, step back. She doesn't belong here." Sarah's voice carried a softer worry. "She's different, Tommy. Remember what we've been told." Tommy hesitated for a heartbeat, hearing his parents' concern, but something deeper propelled him forward, the simple, undeniable need to show kindness. "It's just, she's hungry," he whispered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. His blue eyes met Ayani's, and for the first time the girl didn't flinch. She tilted her head, the shadows of fear and doubt warring with something fragile and new hope. With the smallest, most tentative motion, Ayani reached out. Her fingers hovered over the bread, trembling slightly, as if afraid it might vanish into the dusty air. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the first words anyone had heard from her in years escaped Ayani. The name fell softly like a seed planted in the parched earth of Dustwood. Tommy repeated it carefully, testing the sound on his tongue. Ayani. That's a beautiful name. The act was simple, yet it carried a weight neither child fully understood. In that single exchange, a bridge formed between two worlds that had long kept their distance. One small act of generosity, one whispered name, and the impossible became possible. Samuel and Sarah exchanged glances that told of their mixed emotions, pride, fear, and a rising awareness of the prejudice they had absorbed along with the rest of the town. The audience, too, could sense the tension. The story wasn't just about bread. It was about courage, about breaking through barriers that adults had fortified for decades. Every second Ayani spent reaching for Tommy's offering was a moment charged with suspense, each one a testament to the bravery of a child acting from the heart. Ayani's eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected a storm of emotion, the fear of being rejected, the curiosity of connection, and the flicker of trust forming for the first time in years. She wasn't certain what would happen next, but she knew she wanted to try. For Tommy, the reward was instant in the light that softened her features, and the tiny hand that finally closed around the bread. The streets of Dustwood seemed to hold their breath. This simple, quiet act had shifted the energy of the town, setting a tone none of the townspeople could ignore. For the audience, the message was unmistakable. Courage often comes in small, almost imperceptible gestures. Fear may have guided the adults, but bravery and empathy were alive in the hearts of children, powerful enough to challenge the long-standing walls of mistrust and prejudice. And so, a small act of sharing a whispered name and a trembling hand marked the first step in a journey that would ripple far beyond the dusty main street. The story of Ayani and Tommy had begun, and with it the possibility that kindness could reshape the world one hesitant gesture at a time. News of Tommy's simple act of kindness spread through Dustwood faster than a prairie fire in the dry season. Whispers ran from storefront to storefront, carrying a mix of admiration and alarm. Some townspeople shook their heads, muttering about that Apache girl and how children should know their place. Others paused, struck by the courage of a young boy who had defied the invisible walls that fear had built around them. Dustwood was no stranger to tension between settlers and the Apache, and suddenly the streets felt charged with an electric uncertainty. Among those unsettled was Tom Bradley, the wealthiest ranch owner, for miles a man whose influence in Dustwood often shaped public opinion as surely as the law itself. Bradley strode down the street with his boots kicking up dust, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene of Tommy and Ayani together. "This can't go on," he said to himself, voice low but filled with conviction. These children crossing boundaries talking to Apache, it sets a dangerous precedent. People will start thinking the old ways don't matter. Inside his store, Samuel Clark wrestled with the weight of the moment. On one hand, there was the practical reality his livelihood depended on keeping the townspeople satisfied. Business meant stability, respect, and the ability to provide for his family. But on the other, he had just witnessed something rare and profound, a child choosing empathy over fear. His heart tugged in a direction that had little to do with profit or social standing. Every instinct told him to caution Tommy to protect him from the whispers and judgment of the town, yet a quieter, stronger voice reminded him that sometimes integrity required taking a stand. As the tension built in Dustwood, word reached the outskirts of the nearby Apache camp. Within hours, Chief Running Hawk, a tall, commanding figure whose weathered face carried decades of leadership, had gathered the tribal elders and set out for the town. They arrived mounted on sturdy horses, the afternoon sun glinting off the polished wood of ceremonial staffs and the edges of intricately carved gifts. Each elder carried a token of respect, woven blankets, painted pottery, and symbols that spoke to the heritage of their people. At the center of the procession was the chief himself, riding with quiet authority, a presence that demanded attention without a word spoken. The arrival of the Apache elders did little to settle the unease among the townsfolk. Some stepped back, clutching their hats, while others whispered about old rivalries and past skirmishes. Fear and suspicion tangled with curiosity, creating an invisible line between the two groups. And yet the children, Tommy and Ayani, stood together oblivious to the silent stares, embodying the simplest form of trust and humanity. Bradley's voice soon broke the tense hush. "Clark, you need to control your boy. Encouraging these children to mix with Apache, mark my words, it will ruin the respect we've built in this town. You can't just hand over your values to these outsiders." His tone carried authority, but it also revealed the brittle foundation of fear upon which his power rested. Samuel's gaze shifted from Bradley to the procession of Apache elders, their stoic presence and thoughtful expressions softening some of the hardened lines of conflict. In that moment, he understood that the gifts they carried were not bribes, nor a challenge. They were symbols of peace, trust, and shared humanity. Dustwood was at a crossroads. One path followed fear, prejudice, and self-interest. The other, the uncertain terrain of empathy, understanding, and moral courage. The crowd could feel the stakes rising each breath of wind across the dusty street, carrying the tension of a story about to reach its turning point. Would the simple act of a child sharing bread, offering kindness, speaking a name, be enough to bridge the chasm that decades of mistrust had carved into this town? Could empathy outshine fear? Could the innocence of youth redefine the rigid lines drawn by adults? Every pair of eyes in Dustwood seemed fixed on Ayani and Tommy. The moment was heavy with potential, and even those who doubted found themselves silently hoping for the impossible, that something small and pure could prevail over entrenched suspicion. The elders' gifts were more than objects. They were a statement that this town, these people, and these children could find common ground. And in that charged silence, the audience could sense the crescendo of the story. The town teetered on the edge of change, the outcome uncertain, but the path ahead, clear courage and kindness embodied in the smallest of hands, might just have the power to rewrite the rules of Dustwood forever. The afternoon sun stretched across Dustwood as Tommy and Ayani settled near the edge of the main street, sharing scraps of bread and whispered stories that bridged worlds neither fully understood. They laughed quietly, small sounds that somehow cut through the tension lingering among the townspeople. In their innocence, they discovered something adults had long forgotten, that connection and play could dissolve suspicion and fear more effectively than any argument or warning. As they swapped tales of Cloud's animals and small adventures, their friendship grew invisible, threads knitting together hearts across the divide of culture and history. Word of their laughter and shared joy slowly reached the ears of those watching from doorways and windows. People began to pause, noticing not just the two children, but the change in the energy around them. Dustwood, once tense with silent judgment, seemed to breathe a little easier. The sight of Tommy offering a small piece of kindness and Ayani responding with trust became a quiet beacon, a reminder that fear could be outweighed by empathy if only someone had the courage to act. It was then that Chief Running Hawk dismounted from his horse, his presence commanding yet calm. He approached the children, eyes softened with respect as he took in their innocent companionship. From behind him, the elders brought forward a ceremonial gift, an Apache shield hand-painted with vivid designs depicting two children holding hands. The shield was more than decoration. It was a symbol of protection unity, and the promise that kindness could safeguard not only the vulnerable, but also the very bonds between communities. Tommy's blue eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the gesture, while Ayani reached forward cautiously, awe in every measured movement. Chief Running Hawk's voice carried across the street with a weight that silenced the murmuring crowd. "This shield represents trust and friendship," he said. "It honors the courage of a young boy who chose empathy over fear, and a young girl who dared to open her heart." For the first time, Dustwood's people saw that actions, however small, could ripple outward to change lives. Inside the general store, Samuel Clark felt a swell of pride mingled with anxiety. Bradley's warnings echoed in his mind, yet his gaze remained fixed on the children and the chief. He understood that standing with Tommy, and by extension with Ayani, meant defying the fear that had long governed Dustwood. Taking a deep breath, he stepped outside, joining the chief and his son. The crowd held its breath as Samuel placed a steady hand on the ceremonial shield, signaling his support, and implicitly the choice to prioritize justice and morality over profit and prejudice. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, subtle shifts rippled through the town. Some of the townspeople who had once avoided Ayani or whispered cautionary words began to see her and the Apache elders differently. The children of Dustwood, emboldened by Tommy and Ayani's example, approached the Apache camp with curiosity and tentative friendliness. Laughter and conversation began to echo beyond the main street, a sign that the rigid barriers of fear were starting to crack. The high point of the day came not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet collective realization. Standing for what is right, even against opposition, can create profound change. Samuel and other adults in the town faced the choice between clinging to the old prejudices or embracing a more compassionate path. Witnessing the courage of two children and the integrity of Chief Running Hawk, they began to shift, opening their hearts and minds to the possibility that community could be redefined by love and understanding rather than suspicion and isolation. By the end of the afternoon, Dustwood had changed in ways that could not be undone. The shield, now proudly displayed outside the general store, served as a visible promise of unity. Children played together across cultural lines. Families began to speak with neighbors they had previously avoided, and a quiet hope settled over the town. For the audience, the lesson was clear. Courage and kindness, even in their simplest forms, have the power to confront prejudice, heal wounds, and forge connections that last far beyond a single day. In that moment, Tommy and Ayani's friendship became more than a story of two children. It became a testament to the transformative force of empathy, a living reminder that the smallest acts of bravery can reshape not just a town, but the hearts of everyone within it. Dustwood, once a town divided by fear, now held the possibility of reconciliation, guided by the unassuming power of two young hearts who chose understanding over distrust. By the end of that remarkable day, Dustwood had been quietly transformed. What began as a small, courageous act by Ayani, supported by the steadfast empathy of Tommy, had rippled outward to challenge the town's long-held prejudices. A child's gesture, offering bread and friendship, had done what generations of warnings, rumors, and fear could not. It had opened hearts. For the first time in memory, The Apache and the settlers shared not only space, but a tentative peace, their eyes meeting with curiosity rather than suspicion. The lessons of that afternoon would linger far beyond the dusty streets and wooden storefronts. At the heart of this transformation lay clear values that resonated across both communities. Kindness unprompted and unconditional had proven its power to break down barriers. Courage, even in the smallest of hands, could confront fear and prejudice more effectively than any speech or law. Cooperation between cultures, once considered impossible, became tangible through simple human connection. And above all, moral integrity, the decision to act rightly even at personal or financial risk, shone as a guiding principle. Samuel Clark's choice to support his son, despite Bradley's threats and the pressures of town politics, embodied the notion that doing what is just can outweigh short-term gain. The Apache's shield, now proudly displayed in the window of the Clark General Store, became more than a ceremonial object. It was a symbol etched with meaning. The image of two children holding hands reminded the town that friendship and mutual respect could survive even the deepest divides. To anyone passing by, the shield stood as a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the courage to act on it. For Dustwood, it was a daily prompt to remember that unity and understanding were built not with force, but with small, consistent acts of care. For the audience, the lesson was equally profound. Acts of kindness, no matter how modest, can reshape the future. Children, often underestimated by adults, may hold the key to teaching humanity its truest values. Watching Ayani and Tommy, viewers could see that bravery often appears in quiet, unassuming forms, and that influence is not reserved for the powerful or wealthy. It resides in those willing to do what is right, even when the world expects them to look away. Dustwood's story also serves as a reminder for today's world. Fear of the unknown, prejudice, and division remain persistent challenges. But Ayani's courage and Tommy's empathy illustrate that even small gestures can ignite meaningful change. Compassion and moral clarity are timeless forces capable of bridging gaps between communities, generations, and cultures. By embracing kindness and acting with integrity, individuals can leave legacies far greater than material wealth or social standing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the main street, Samuel, Sarah, Tommy, and Ayani stood together, a living tableau of what is possible when courage meets compassion. The townspeople, once hesitant, now watched with respect, and slowly, quietly began to follow the example set by these young hearts. Children from both communities began to play together, laughter weaving a new rhythm through the dusty streets, signaling that hope and understanding could flourish even in the harshest landscapes. And now, dear viewers, the story leaves its mark not just on Dustwood, but on anyone willing to listen. If you've been moved by the courage of Ayani, the empathy of Tommy, and the quiet transformation of a town, join us on Epic Western Stories. Follow the channel, share the story, leave a like, and comment below to continue exploring the untamed, emotional, and unforgettable tales of the Wild West. Remember, in a world that often rewards fear and caution, acts of kindness and bravery still have the power to change destinies. Let this story inspire you to see the extraordinary potential in everyday gestures and to believe that courage and compassion can make a difference today and every day.